of Civil Aviation, Government of India. So, well, we have Mr. Deepak Premnarayan, President I&II and Executive Chairman and Founder, ICS Group, for the opening remarks.
Thank you. Morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. There isn't much that I'd like to take up in terms of time. I'd like to start with an apology, namely that we overshot yesterday in some of the timing part, which is a little unfair on all of you here. And so we will make sure that we stick to the time aspect of it. What is important is just two things I'd like to say. One is, see, with my height, this blocks me, so at least I'm fortunate I'm able to see. Yesterday, what I found was that, and I again would like to share something personally, that I'm not one of those who hangs around a conference for the full day, even if I have a speaking engagement, I'm there specifically. But I must say that each of the sessions, there was so much to learn and to hear, that whether it had to do with the regulatory body, and where is the gentleman here today? Yeah, there, you're there. And Mache Nathan, if I get the name correctly, that session there was so much. The other session which was there in terms of the legal side of it, whether it had to do with the PPP and the presentations that were made by the airport operators, which was the Delhi, and the participation of the Bangalore airport, the investor, which was Fairfax, and the Fraport team, which is here. So to me, because this is a sector that excites me personally, also other than the chamber, because of my businesses. So that is a declaration that I'm making from the point of view of governance. But so I found it very learning. And as somebody said, knowledge is the only law that doesn't follow the rule of diminishing returns. So we keep learning, Second thing, as far as the speakers go also, so the content was good. Maybe the numbers were small because this is the first time that we're having an aviation conference. But at the same time, there was a participation from serious players. And with this, I'd like to kickstart. Yes, lastly, the minister made a very strong request that IMC is going to form a task force and to submit a paper to him, which he's going to then publicly showcase, that has to do with the issues around regulation. Vasu, some of the points that you brought up yesterday, some of the points that the other gentleman brought up yesterday. It has to do whether you land at an airport in Delhi. Your baggage will not go to Pune directly. You have to pick it up, and then you have to clear, and then go into the domestic section. Whereas that should be in Frankfurt, it is seamless. You just cover 20 meters and off you go to the next gate. So that should happen here too. There are issues like this. And so with that, thank you, and all the best to all of us today.
Thank you, Mr. Premnarayan, for putting yesterday's sessions in a nutshell for all present. Indeed, it was a fruitful first day of the conference, and we all are looking forward to a fulfilling day even today. We begin our first panel session of the day, which is on global insights into key aviation projects and infrastructure opportunities. This will be moderated by Dr. Vasudevan S., Director, Aerospace and Defense, KPMG. I request you, sir, to kindly take your seat on the dais. The panelists are Mr. Matthias Engler, MD and of Fraport Project Office, Delhi, Fraport AG, Dr. Irfan Al-Hassani, Senior Economist and Editor-in-Chief, Dubai Economic Council, and Madam Elena Silkina, Head of Finance, Northern Capital Gateway LLC, Pulkova Airport. Welcome, everybody. I shall quickly introduce the session moderator as well as the panelists. Dr. Vasudevan S., Director, Infrastructure, Government and Health Care Practice, KPMG, is also the global lead of airports and brings with him more than 16 years of experience with private and public sector clients on infrastructure PPP transactions. He led the teams that successfully advised the Maharashtra and Goa governments, is also advising Government of Andhra Pradesh and working closely with airport authorities in Saudi Arabia, Singapore, Vietnam, Bhutan, and Oman. Prior to his work on airports, he has led many engagements for leading transport clients, including NHAI, RVNL, Ministry of Shipping, Reliance Infrastructure, GMR Group, Mitsui, and the World Bank, to name a few. He's currently leading the project management consultancy for the government's flagship USD 100 billion Sagarmala program led by the Ministry of Shipping, Government of India. Mr. Matthias Engler, Managing Director, Fraport Project Office Delhi, Fraport AG, and Senior Project Manager, Fraport AG, has 20 years of experience in the aviation business and currently attends to the investments of Fraport in Asia as well as monitors Asia aviation markets. He represents Fraport AG on the board of directors of Delhi International Airport Limited, has been involved in several airport privatization projects in Europe and Asia, led the project team for successful acquisition of Ljubljana Airport, Slovenia, before joining the Global Investments and Management Department. He was working for the Fraport AG Special Projects and Ground Handling Departments. Dr. Irfan Al-Hassani, Senior Economist and Editor-in-Chief, Dubai Economic Council, DEC, the think tank of Government of Dubai, UAE, in the economic policy making, has been named by Queensland authorities in Australia as an international expert in PPP. He published several papers in referred and non-referred journals and one book entitled International Finance. His research interests covered a wide range of topics and has received numerous awards and certificates. Year 2008, he was the third prize winner of the Dubai Economic Research Award, the DERA. The winning paper was presented at the Canadian Economic Association Annual Conference. 2002, he was elected the best research project from the Arab Society for Economic Research at Cairo, Egypt, to conduct a study on the political economy of international financial crisis and their implications to GCC markets. Madam Silkina Elena, Head of Finance Director, Northern Capital Gateway LLC, Pulkova Airport, St. Petersburg, Russia. Corporate finance executive with 15 plus years expertise in advisory and in-house finance. Started a management position in Pulkova Airport, a project company of the first Russian PPP and international $1.2 billion project finance project in the transportation industry operated by the international strategic investor Fraport. Well, with those words, I leave the charge of this session to moderator Dr. Vasudevan.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. I think you couldn't have asked for a better panel to kickstart this session today. We've got some experts both to the right and left of me. Let me just quickly set a context for today's discussion. As we discussed yesterday, the focus really in India today is about how to maybe make the next step towards making PPP successful. So India has a long history, as you know, not just in airports, but also in other sectors of having successful PPP projects implemented. But coming to the specific context of airports per se, we have seen some fantastic assets built in the last 10 years. And we are proud of them because they are some of the world's best airports today and rank consistently among the top 5. Which obviously we should take great pride in. But there have been a whole host of issues and challenges that these PPPs have faced in their own cases. Like in Delhi and Bombay, we had a specific set of issues. Bangalore and Hyderabad had to go through other teething problems. And many of those issues are still unresolved, while policy has tried to address most of them in the recent past. So looking forward, of course, as we discussed yesterday, the challenge is only going to get bigger because we need more investments in creating these additional capacities. While the policy has been geared to address some of those investor concerns, which again we discussed yesterday, I think it will be useful to understand how some of the other countries that we look at in terms of benchmarks have gone through the similar experience. Some of them, of course, we've got some people with many years of experience like Matthias Engler here, who comes from Fraport. And they, as you know, were part of the consortium in the Delhi airport and continue to play a role, I would assume, even at this point. And Siddharth, of course, mentioned about some of the key learnings that they brought to the GMR group when they actually started operating this new airport after the expansion. We have Dr. Irfan, a well-known economist and fellow economist, I should say. And we just heard about some of the things that he's done in the last 5-6 years. A lot of insights that he can bring to us this morning in terms of his own experience. He's done a lot of work on PPPs himself as part of his research work. So it'll be interesting to understand his views on what he thinks are important takeaways from his knowledge of PPPs across the world. We've got Elena here, who represents Pulkovo Airport, which I'm told is the first airport PPP project to be implemented in Russia. I was just having a coffee chat with her some time back. Some very interesting insights that she provided in terms of the challenges that they had in getting this operational. So with that brief introduction, let me maybe open up the discussion with Pulkovo Airport. Elena, tell us about the initial process of finalizing Pulkovo Airport as a candidate for a PPP transaction, and also some brief features of the project which you think are important for the audience here to know. And then I will come to you with specific questions later on.
The idea of the project was risen in the middle of 2010s because the status of the airport did not correspond to the status of the city. St. Petersburg is one of the most beautiful landmarks, and the airport itself was underinvested for the last 10 years. And the concept of the city was to develop it without any budgetary investments. And at that time, the team that was representing the investment decision-making in the city comprised of international level consultants, lawyers, operational people. So all the people in the city management were very well prepared and had international experience. This was one of the most fantastic things that could happen at the city level. There was also an intent to do the PPP as a very efficient way of procuring that the public asset is done in time without budgetary funds. And what happened is that the city of St. Petersburg managed to develop a PPP law, a regional PPP law, far ahead of the federal law, which came maybe 5 years later as a first draft. So we structured the transaction under a regional law, which was, and this was one of the major challenges, which was far ahead of the legislation that was existing in the country. Under this PPP, we managed to raise international project finance, so the PPP was bankable at the international level. At the same time, we faced really serious issues at the federal level when some federal authorities who are reviewing any airport came across. So these were anti-monopoly issues, these were security issues, because it was a new project. It was a first-time international operator of Fraport who was managing a Russian strategic asset. And in Russia, airports are strategic assets. They have to be held by minimum 50% by Russian entities as final beneficiaries and legally as well. So the project was planned for around 3 years. The architectural design was tendered far ahead of the PPP bidding. The design was a prerequisite, and as we discussed, it was a luxury one. So it was, the airport had to become a new landmark of the city. It is indeed very beautiful. In a couple of hours I will show you the pictures, and it's very excessive in terms of investments and in terms of maintenance requirements. So it's quite expensive. What was really important to make this project happen, indeed, was the level of commitment and education with the government partner, with a public partner. Without this level of commitment, I hardly think that the project could happen.
Let me come to you, Matthias. We've, of course, as I mentioned, Delhi Airport is a very good example of how PPPs can deliver value. And as Siddharth mentioned yesterday, this is probably the best example of an airport of this size having been built in the time frame that it was. 37 months, which is probably better than, as he mentioned, airports globally. And he referred to Kuala Lumpur, he referred to Heathrow and others. Now that's insofar as the efficiency in construction is concerned. You guys came in as partners to help them actually improve operations. And we had a legacy of government running the operations in most of our leading airports, including Bombay, Bangalore and others. Where did you see this value coming from Fraport based on your own experience? Because Fraport is known to have operated many such airports under concessions globally. But when you were chosen as a partner, what was your first idea about running an asset in India, and where did you see those challenges and how did you address them? Very briefly, yeah.
Yeah, so thanks. Indeed, we are active here in India, as Siddharth has already said yesterday, since 2006, when the concession for Delhi airport was awarded. And yeah, at that time, we were very happy that now also India has chosen to privatize airport and to give out concessions. As you have rightly said, Fraport is very experienced worldwide in all kinds of PPP projects, and during the last 15 years or so, we really we had experience with all PPP models. So we have concessions in our portfolio. Also, we are active in 2 airports as private minority shareholders, where the majority of the airport is still held by a state or a state-owned entity. We had management contracts in other countries, and we were also looking at O&M contracts that is now also a plan here in India for further projects to be privatized. But coming back to our experience in Delhi, as Siddharth has also already pointed out yesterday, at that time, Fraport was the experienced airport operator that has joined the consortium, and so this was also a prerequisite at that time. So we were then finally, after our consortium was chosen to be awarded the concession, we were the designated airport operator of Delhi Airport, and we were very much involved in first of all analyzing the operational procedures, and then also making proposals how to further enhance these operational processes, how to do it more efficiently. We did a lot of training for the Indian colleagues. So when we started with the concession as the operator partner, we had I think it was 5 or 6 colleagues from Germany seconded to Delhi Airport at different positions, most of them in the operational part of the company. So for example, for terminal operations, for cargo operations, we have also set up some kind of quality assurance within the company. So, and in general, we did a lot of training, and we tried over the years to bring up the know-how also at the level of DIAL, so of the project company. And then, as it was already planned from the very beginning, over the years, when we managed to bring more know-how to the colleagues at DIAL, then over the years we reduced the number of the Fraport secondees at Delhi Airport. So finally, there were then 2 colleagues seconded. And now, after also Terminal 3 went into operation, we decided that we are now doing our involvement mainly with short-term consulting activities from time to time on a need basis. So we are in close contact with the colleagues of Delhi Airport, and right now, whenever they need something, then we send some experts to Delhi for 1 or 2 weeks, and then they are discussing with the colleagues on the ground, and then they give their advice. And this is really in various aspects of the airport operations, or for example, for firefighting, for operational issues on the apron, for example, for dual taxi lane operations, also for terminal-related questions regarding commercial activities in the terminal. So we are really looking after everything. And maybe one very important aspect where we played quite significant role was really the setup of the new Terminal 3. So this, I think, is a very impressive terminal and a very impressive building. So, and as you have said, it was constructed in quite a short time frame. Maybe our colleagues in Berlin, in Germany, could learn a bit from that experience. So unfortunately, there it takes some more time, but in Delhi we managed really to do it in time and also in budget. And this was one very big challenge regarding project management and construction management. But then also, and this is where the Fraport colleagues contributed a lot, also regarding the operational implementation of the project then finally. So first of all, planning everything, and then when going live and putting the terminal in operation. So this was where we, I think, as Fraport, added a lot of value in Delhi as an experienced airport operator, especially when this big new terminal was finally put into operation. And I think this was done quite smoothly and very successfully. And I think most of you will know Delhi Airport, and especially Terminal 3. And when you just compare it with the situation before this was put into operation, I think it's a very big step. And I mean, it's not only us in Delhi, so also here in Mumbai, the colleagues have managed to construct a very nice, very big new terminal and put it into operation sometime after we did it in Delhi, but nevertheless, I think these are 2 very good examples how PPP projects can really add value and not only be a very good project for the project participants or for the company, but also for the passengers, also for the Indian government. So I think that's also quite impressive what Siddharth has told us yesterday. So when calculating the number of concession fees that Airports Authority received over the years, not only from us in Delhi, but also from the colleagues in Mumbai and from other privatized airports. So I think also they should be very happy with that, and with this money that could be collected from these concession revenues, they can invest it in smaller airports in other parts of India. And I think in this regard, everybody has really benefited from these privatizations.
Thank you, Matthias. I have to ask you this question, of course. You mentioned about T3, and it is clearly of our flagship airport terminals. One, are you happy with what GMR is doing based on all the knowledge that you've transferred today at T3? Because you don't have an active role anymore.
Yeah, so as I said, we still have an active role. So we have decided to, together with our friends of GMR, how to contribute, and we just are in the course of finalizing some more activities from Fraport colleagues who will go there. But yes, I think we are happy in the way that the terminal is operated. So also the Dial colleagues, and I think it's not only GMR, but it's Dial, and also the Malaysian colleagues were playing a role for some years. So I think you should not reduce it to only GMR. So it's also other parties who have contributed to this Delhi airport and to this Terminal 3, as you can see it right now. But yes, I think the colleagues at IL are doing a good job. And again, I think Fraport has contributed a lot to that, and we have transferred some know-how that is now also used by the Dial colleagues in operating this terminal. And when you see the dramatic growth in traffic, especially also in Delhi, and how this was handled over the last years, and despite of this growth in traffic, Delhi Airport has won some awards in recent years, and this is also something that is quite important for Fraport to contribute to the passenger experience. So the passenger should feel well at the airport, and yeah, looking at the ASQ ratings, so I think we can be quite happy with Delhi Airport and the way it is operated. Yeah.
Thank you, but that was a leading question, and I'm going to shoot this on behalf of the audience who also experienced T1D in Delhi, and the experience is quite distinct from T3. So is there something that you missed doing there? Because to be fair to GMR and to the Malaysian Airports Consortium and Frappo, I think the experience at T3 is completely different from what somebody goes through in T1D. Not that it's bad, but there is a clear difference. And why do you think there is that difference?
Yes, that's a fair question, and I have to admit that it's a different passenger experience when you travel from Terminal 1, T1D, compared to Terminal 3. And I think this, the reason for that might be the really more than impressive growth of the airlines that are operating from Terminal 1. So in Terminal 1 we have the Indian low-cost carriers, so like Indigo, Go Air, SpiceJet, and that's really hard to believe how these carriers were growing their business in the last years. And when we saw that we will get some problems in Terminal 1, we decided last year at Dial level to refurbish the old Terminal 2. And this was especially meant to decongest a bit Terminal 1. And the colleagues of Dial were in contact also with the airlines. And the idea was that one or maybe two of these airlines from T1 could shift their operation to the new refurbished Terminal 2. And I think this would really help the situation and help in getting a better passenger experience. But unfortunately, so far, no airline was willing to shift their operation to Terminal 2. And I think this is also quite an interesting sign, because I'm just asking question to the airline. So why don't you want to shift your operation? So why don't you want a better environment for your passengers? And why are the airlines deciding to stay in this congested Terminal 1. But we have done everything that we can do on short notice to offer to the airlines a possibility to change something. But we, unfortunately, we cannot force any airline to go there.
Thanks, Matthias. It was very useful. And obviously, I think some of the members here would have questions which you can take later on. Dr. Irfan, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.
We had a very interesting conversation yesterday. Dubai, for many reasons, is the benchmark as probably the most successful hub in the world. And it's not a PPP. And you are there heading the council as a man who's done a lot of work on PPPs and now seeing a lot of potential in using some of those learnings to help Dubai grow to the next phase. And we've read a lot of interesting statistics about the Dubai government's plans in terms of expanding the current airport. Lots of press on Al Maktoum, mind-boggling numbers. For some of you who may not be aware, I think the next phase of expansion is expected to cater to about 160 million passengers per annum, and eventually handle about 32 million tons of cargo. 32 million tons of cargo. The reason I'm repeating that is because India, as a country, today handles about 2.5 million tons of cargo. Hong Kong, which is the largest airport in the world by cargo volume, handles about 5 million tons of cargo. Here is an airport which wants to create capacity for 32 million tons of cargo, which they expect to handle in the next 10, 15, or 20 years. We don't know. Just want to hear from you, Dr. Irfan. Are these numbers realizable? Do you think PPP is the way to deliver these numbers?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, and I'd like to take this opportunity to deeply thank PPP Expert, in addition to I&II, for giving me this amazing experience. Well, Mr. Vaso, as you're probably aware, I will have a standalone session at the end of today, and I will showcase Dubai. So to be honest, I don't like to fire from now my session. However, of course, what you said is, I think, widely sensible in terms of the vision of Dubai's government to be one of the most innovative city in the world, the hub, as you said, the regional and the global hub for business and finance. So many, mottos we come to hear every day, sometimes from. However, what I really need to focus in this presentation, if you like, is to draw some lessons learned from the international best practices worldwide. Despite the novelty and popularity of PPP around the world, still, PPP perceived as a risky and costly, by the way, paradigm relative to the traditional procurement. So I think it might be very necessary, at least for, emerging PPP markets just like India, to benefit. However, my advice is, and despite the the necessity of this stuff, but also the process should be handled cautiously. Why? Because of the different particulars of countries in terms of regulatory, legislative, and also institutional framework. Also, there is a difference between countries concerning the financial markets and also the risk allocation framework, etc. However, I made an intensive research during my PhD study in the UK. And I have reviewed dozens of references and practices around the world, emerging, advanced, and also developing countries. And I have discovered that there are about 5 critical success factors that every single jurisdiction active in PPP around the world should take care of it. And those are as follows. The first one is a proven VFM, value for money, which is the difference between, I don't like to dive deeply into these technical financial aspects because I'm sure many of you already know that. But for example, at least to be aware from now that there should be cost saving resulted in PPP. The second one is the enhanced regulatory, legislative, and also an institutional framework pertaining to PPP, which is a very, very critical issue. And I think all of us today and also yesterday we stress. The third one is risk allocation framework. In the literature, it is supposed that most, if not all risk, I'm afraid, should be transferred to the private sector. And although I am, as an economist, I do believe that this is very important, but not necessarily in all cases, in all countries, in all projects. Why? Because unless the public sector ensured that the private sector would be able to mitigate and manage, then there is no sense to transfer. Because at the end of the day, there might be the problem of, bankruptcy, or, hurdles and challenging facing the private sector to mitigate these risks. And then the pure loser would be the end users. The other thing is the financial framework. It is supposed that, one of the critical, reason behind, involving in PPP is to tap to the privately financing scheme. And I think this is very important. However, unless there is a deep financial markets, unless there is a critical and innovative and alternative financial schemes to be carried out, or to be enacted by the government, then there might be some risk at the end of the day. And also, among the critical success factors is that the government should have at hand an effective performance appraisal, KPIs, to measure the quality of the asset or public services provision process to be delivered by the private sector. And at the end, also, there is also, we said, risk allocation. I think this is very important. However, if you like me to stress on one of these things, I think what we have, I think discussed early morning, it's all about the regulatory framework and also an institutional framework. Among the critical lessons we can draw from the best practice worldwide, for example, Australia, Canada, of course, United Kingdom, in addition to the United States, Japan, and also BRICS countries, South Africa, Brazil, India, China, and Russia, by the way, and also Turkey, most recently, is that all these countries have a federal PPP law. And I think Elena, maybe she indicated to that thing that there should be, by the way, in federal countries like India, a dedicated federal PPP law that set the tone, that includes the critical guidelines and very broad and strategic aspect that should be, disseminated across the territories. However, in the same time, in the state government level, there should be also dedicated PPP laws, by the way, that meet the local needs. Because, very massive countries like India has, different, territories with different needs. So we need to cater for that, local needs, and then for the favor of end users. However, if you take it from institutional framework, most of jurisdictions active in PPP around the world in these countries have sort of PPP units. I wonder if there is PPP units here in India. I think there is, correct? Or sometimes PPP cells. And these institutions, by the way, Vaso, do very important two functions. Function one is a promotional campaign to promote for PPP. However, the second point is technical advice. It provides solutions, critical advice, toolkits, if you like, to face, to remedy the challenges and risk encountered in PPP. So all these things, actually there is, dozens of measures or indicators that should be taken in consideration when we try, for example, to enhance PPP, and most importantly, I think, how to attract the private sector, whether local or FDIs.
Thanks, Dr. Irfan. Let me just shoot the next question again to you. What are the three things that you think we as the Indian government should be doing in order to ensure or address this huge problem that we're having about not being able to attract enough overseas investment?
Yeah.
We know, of course, FRAPO and other parties have joined in as minority partners, but we're looking at solutions for them to actually lead investments in India.
Well, actually, within my just now presentation, I think I already indicated to some of them. However, in addition to the enhanced regulatory, legislative, legal, and also institutional, but also, for example, from financial perspective, what I do stress is that the government should always initiate, alternative and critical and, smart solutions to finance, to help the private sector. For example, one of the most critical and danger risk encountered in PPP, in whatever, by the way, the industry, not necessarily the airport, but for example, transit-related roads, social infrastructure, is, in some projects, the revenues generated from end users is done by the private sector, as as per the contract agreed upon between the two partners, correct? Just like the roads in, for example, I think in India here, just last night I had a tour in the round city and I crossed to that ceiling, they call the ceiling bridge, when, they pay. So if this toll would be paid to the private sector, correct? I mean, okay. In this case, the problem encountered in such toll-related projects, including maybe airports, by the way, as the cases in some countries at least, is the below expected revenues. That means the estimated revenues that's supposed to be generated by the private sector partner would be less than expected, and then there will be a loss. In this case, by the way, the government should be very kind, and not only just kind as initiative by the government to help the private, but should be stipulated in the contract, which is, the contract should stipulate that in case, for example, it depends on the agreement, by the way, and negotiation from the beginning. However, for example, if the agreement suggests or stipulates that in case after, within the first 2 or 3 years, if the revenues is below than expected, then the government will compensate the private sector, by the way. Even if you say, Irfan, then what is the benefits from the PPP since the government will pay at the end of the day? I would say, Vaso, this is not necessarily will happen, but in case, just in case, the government should also have at hand an alternative scheme to compensate, to help the private sector. Because otherwise, by the way, if you take it from purely economic perspective or financial perspective, if there is a loss in the side of private sector, then believe me, the end, loser would be the end users, the people, the well-being. Why? Because simply, if the private sector get, for example, bankrupt or disconnect, stop keep the project in limbo, then of course there will be no complete PPP projects. Then we will not have an amazing and excellent airport, terminals, customer service, etc. Then we will lose. So also the government should not only take it from a purely and exclusively financial and revenues perspective, but also it should encourage, support the private sector to bring in quality and efficiency for the favor of end users.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Irfan. I think one of those points is being addressed anyways on the regulatory part. And as we discussed yesterday, and Deepak mentioned that also in his opening remarks, that we are presenting a paper to the government. And there is already some work that we are doing along with the Association of Private Airport Operators to see if some of the kinks in the regulatory framework can be addressed. On the other part, I agree with you that many concession agreements globally do have provisions for revenue shortfall within certain bands, of course, of traffic risk. And there are cases where, of course, some of that also is recouped back when the project is doing well. And I think the Joint Secretary yesterday mentioned in her speech that she referred to the Kelkar Committee report, which was basically a review done by a government-appointed committee to understand what has gone wrong with PPP contracts in India. And some of those recommendations pertain to having specific renegotiation clauses built into the agreement, especially to address issues around revenue shortfall and traffic shortfall. Let me quickly...
I don't like to forget, maybe it might be a very good opportunity to, I don't like to intervene in the organizers' business, but I do suggest, as usual, as I did before, by the way, in some conferences I attended, is to conclude a white or policy paper at the end of this conference that encompasses the critical insights, if you like, presentations, thoughts, because at the end of the day, for me, just like all of you, I suppose, we are not coming here just to to stay, you know, a couple of nights in this amazing hotel. By the way, congratulations for India for having such an amazing hotel, but also to benefit the Indian
Sure.
Jurisdictions Act, the people. It's all about the well-being and the interests of Indian people.
Thanks, thanks. We'll take that. Elena has been quiet for some time, and let me ask her a few more questions very quickly. I think we are also running short of time. Elena, you mentioned that for this airport today handles about 14 million passengers, and it's growing. But the interesting thing you mentioned is also that you're also competing with other airports, and not just with airports, also a high-speed rail link, right? So what is the view that the operator today has in terms of addressing some of those risks? As Irfan mentioned, some of them I suspect is built into the contract already. But what happens in a situation where you suddenly find that the traffic doesn't grow or you lose that traffic to the rail link, and it creates a serious financial issue somewhere down the line? Do you foresee that happening, number one? And what are the safeguards built into the agreement which you can talk about and probably help our members understand?
Thank you for the question. Pulkovo Airport is a unique airport asset. First of all, because it's a fantastic destination, and as a final destination point, there's a belief that since the tourism is growing and the economy is growing, the traffic will continue growing. Secondly, the airport had an ambition to develop as a hub, but you can't do it without a base airline, and it's like a question of really a strategy, how you cooperate with your key partner, the base carrier. Unfortunately, our base carrier was acquired by the Russian largest airline group, Aeroflot, which decided not to develop a hub in St. Petersburg. So we had a strategic challenge what to do further, because once you are used, the base carrier is used as a feeder and a jobber to Moscow airports, which are already huge and taking almost half of the whole traffic market in Russia. This is we are totally around 250 airports, and just one city holds almost half of the traffic. I think it's quite similar to what we have in India. So traffic risk was perceived indeed as one of the most important ones for the PPP. We did a lot of scenarios and sensitivities what happened, and though we have an exclusivity clause for the whole concession period for St. Petersburg and for the region around, the whole catchment area is our exclusivity area. But we're strongly competing not only with the nearby airports, which is Finland, which is reachable within a car drive and very easily can be used by our catchment area inhabitants, with Moscow, which is again due to the strategy of our current base carrier, is taking out the international traffic, which is earning EBITDA for us just in terms of strategy. We're also competing with rail, because Moscow and St. Pete's are connected with a high-speed rail. It takes you around 4 hours to get from St. Petersburg to Moscow, and the intensity of the traffic, rail traffic, is increasing dramatically. So we are pricing our services taking this into account as well.
No, that's very interesting because we do foresee some of these scenarios emerging in tier 2 towns. And of course competing, and yesterday of course the minister mentioned about rail parity, but I think the railways is already addressing that risk from their perspective. They've already gone into dynamic pricing now for upper class travel. So recently, just to share my experience, I wanted to book a ticket on Rajdhani between Delhi and Mumbai, and I suddenly found that the first AC fare was cheaper than the second AC fare. And they're also now trying to compete not just with their own peers in the network, but also with airlines, and it'll be interesting to see how that competition pans out in future in India. But one last question to Matthias, and let's conclude. And the reason I'm asking him this is because we are also now looking at smaller airports like Jaipur and Ahmedabad being given on long-term O&M contracts. Now, there is a view which has come from the market that some of these smaller airports can be geographically clustered or bundled in order to make them a little more attractive for investors, because they're small assets in themselves as individual assets. And Frappo has had the experience of actually bidding and operating these bundle concessions globally. I think the most recent experience is the one they've done in Greece, where they've taken up 14 airports across islands, and that's an interesting case study, which I wanted Matthias to quickly talk about, and then we can conclude after that. Yeah.
Okay, so very, very quickly, yes, so we have just taken over the operation of these airports in Greece, and this was a privatization where the Greek government has decided to privatize, it was called Greek Regional Airports, and it's a lot of islands, so Greece has a lot of islands, and 14 of these airports should be privatized, and the Greek government decided to arrange for 2 clusters. So each was consisting of 7 airports, and in each cluster there was one relatively big airport. So I think this was about 4 to 5 million passengers per year, and then take this together with some smaller airports. And yeah, Fraport has won in a competitive bidding process both of these clusters. So this was not envisaged from the very beginning, so it would have also been the possibility that 2 different companies would have won each one cluster each. But I think the general idea is quite good to combine 1 or 2 bigger airports together with some smaller airports, and there are more examples worldwide. So for example, in Portugal, when ANA, the Portuguese airport operator, was privatized, also there was a cluster of some smaller island airports who could not be operated on a profitable basis, and to combine this together with a bigger airport. And so in the end, the operator has the advantage to bundle some overhead functions for all these airports, and then it can be a cross-subsidization of smaller airports that per se could not be operated in a viable and on a profitable basis. And this might be the possibility also for the government to privatize these smaller airports together with a bigger one, because for a small airport alone that cannot be operated in a profitable way, it would not be possible to find a private operator if the government wants to do this.
Thank you so much, and I think we should conclude there. Since we are over short time, and I did promise that we will have a couple of questions. Can we have at least one question from the audience for any of the members? Does anybody have a question? No questions. One question. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. This is to Dr. yourself. You know, if Dubai is going to be looking at 160 million passengers, what's going to happen to Abu Dhabi airport expansion, which they're doing, and it's going to start shortly?
Sorry, just last part of the question.
See, Abu Dhabi
Yeah.
airport also wants to become a hub. So with this competition, what's going to be the impact on that 160 million and 32 million in terms of freight?
Well, to be honest, I don't like to talk in politics. You know, Dubai and Abu Dhabi are both, 2 emirates, and there is a very close political and even social, by the way. However, I think Dubai's standalone, city economy, it has its, long history, if you like, standing in terms of, commercial tourism and also aviation relationship with many many countries worldwide. So I don't think there is a sort of competition, but maybe this is the law.
Sorry, I'm not referring to it as competition.
Yeah.
I'm referring that, let's say it's like India. UAE is one country,
Yeah, correct.
It's between Bombay and Delhi. It's
Yeah.
between Abu Dhabi and Dubai.
Yeah.
So basically the resources, will they lie idle? I'm looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah. UAE is a federal, country, and each, emirate has its own resources and also regulatory framework and everything. So I think Abu Dhabi, if it could, enhance its airport infrastructure development, then it will be in favor of the whole country, because if Abu Dhabi would be more stronger in terms of, for example, airport industry or anything else, then it would be also attractive for the whole country, FDIs, tourism, and the same thing apply to Dubai. So I think they work together in a more complementary basis. Yeah, thank you.
Deepak, I think he may share more in his session, or probably in the corridors. Maybe he's not too happy discussing this with you. Yeah. Anyways, thanks a lot to all the members, Dr. Irfan, Matthias, Elena. I think we had some wonderful insights from each of your case studies. And thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. Thank you. Yeah.
Dr. Vasudevan, before we conclude this session, could I request you as the session moderator to please present mementos to the expert panel, beginning with Mr. Matthias Engler, MD of Report Project Office Delhi, Report AG. Dr. Irfan Al-Hassani, Senior Economist and Editor-in-Chief, Dubai Economic Council. And Madam Elena Silkina, Head of Finance, Northern Capital Gateway LLC, Pulkova Airport. Thank you. You're requested to kindly take your seats in the audience as I call upon Mr. Satyajit Datta, Joint General Manager, ASM, Airports Authority of India, for his presentation on initiatives by AAI under Ease of Doing Business for Construction Sector. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Satyajit Datta, who is the Joint General Manager, ASM, Airports Authority of India, is also Joint General Manager, Air Traffic Management, NOC, Airport Authority of India. Earlier, his posting was as Joint General Manager, Air Traffic Management, Standards, Quality Management and Safety, Airport Authority of India. Also posted as Technical Expert at Delegation of India in ACAO Council, Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Mr. Datta.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the delay. Till now we have been discussing about investments and development of airport, selecting site for airports, and various other issues. Now we will be talking about another important aspect of airport, which is also very important, likewise investments and other issues. Like yesterday, our Honorable Minister has said, one of the most important parameter in aviation industry is the safety. If we look at the 5 strategic objectives that I&II, International Civil Aviation Organization, has set up for all the member states, and the number 1 is the safety, and number 2 is the air navigation capacity and efficiency. And then comes security, facilitation, and then economic development of air transport, and the last but not the least is the environmental protection. So today the topic that I'm going to take and cover under initiative will look at the airport from different perspective. That is how we can ensure safe operation at airports. Along with that, we have to maintain capacity and efficiency. Like yesterday, we talked about accessibility to airport. There was a lot of talk how airport should be accessible and all. Now you develop airport and make it accessible, but if it is not accessible to the flights that are going to operate, so it will not be successful. Why I'm talking about this, if we have obstacle all around the airport, then airport will not be, you will not be able to use the airport to its full potential. And moreover, maybe the runway length is to be reduced. We call it the threshold is to be shifted. The landing distance will reduce. The type of aircraft that could operate would be different than what you can say conceive or propose in the initial stage. So there is something for those, it is a technical word, we call it OLS, obstacle limitation surfaces. So obstacle limitation surfaces around the airport is to be protected. If we do not protect that, then aircraft will not be able to operate on any airport. So based on this, I'll talk what is the role of airport authority for this and what initiative we have taken in the recent past under Ministry of Urban Development's ease of doing business and for this sector. So if we look at the role of AI in construction sector, so AI has been entrusted with the responsibility of issuing NOC, no objection certificate for high clearances around airport. Why did high clearances? I told you, to control the obstacle around airport. And where from this power comes? Power comes from GSR 751, that is the Government of India Gazette notification, which is the latest one is GSR 751, where it has been mentioned the detailed procedures, how it is to be done and who will be doing it. And how GSR has been promulgated? Power is from the Aircraft Act 1934, Section 9A.